right. Well, Coach, I tell you what, this is interesting. You know, it's going to be on Thursday. It'll be 25 years since you were named head coach of the Saints. It probably doesn't seem like time has flown that quickly, huh?
Well, that's right. Well, let's see, 25 years. Gosh, when I was head coach of the 49ers, that must have been 35 years ago, I guess. So we're close to that.
Well, I was digging up in my media guide before I had a chance to call you, and I noticed that you were born in beautiful Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That's right, yeah.
It seems like there must be something magic about football in Western Pennsylvania. For example, current Saints head coach Jim Haslett is from there, and you know, great players like George Blanda, Johnny Unitas, and Dan Marino. It just
Ralph Felton plays the Redskins. There's a lot of them up there, yeah. Pennsylvania. Yep, that's where those big coal miners are, you know. That's why you got those big football players, you know.
A lot of work, and people who've never been in coal mines before, relatives of mine have. It takes pretty strong individuals to handle all that coal coming in and out.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And then it says here that your family moved up to White Plains, New York.
Yes, right outside New York City.
And that must have been a pretty interesting childhood you had as well, living in the Northeast.
Yeah, well, from then on, I grew up from there until I went to college and so forth.
That's right, I believe the beautiful University of Maryland.
Yeah, yep.
And back in 1953, it says you played halfback, and you were part of a national championship team under Coach Jim Tatum.
That's right, yep.
And who was y'all opponents in that championship?
Well, see, we were, in those days, you know, they took you on your record of what you did, who you played against, and a lot of times what happens is that you met teams within your schedule during the year. See, they didn't have a championship game as such, you know. They didn't have one where you'd go meet another team that was up for the championship like they're doing now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you had the best record, and you played the tough teams, and you won them. Of course, when you were national champion. That's what I get. The way it came out, I guess.
And that brings up an interesting question. Do you think today, or I don't know if this would have worked back then, but do you think that college football would be better off having a playoff system like Division 1A, 2, and 3 does?
Well, yeah, I think it is. You know, I think it would be much better because then you'd have the real winner. You know, whoever came out of that would be the guy who actually, or the team that was the number one team.
Oh, and then it says 1954, you had your opportunity and got drafted by the New York Giants, a very accomplished team in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And to show you how the money has changed, it says here your bonus for signing with the Giants was $1,000.
Well, yeah, just, okay, I'll say yeah.
Okay. I bring that story up because I remember a few years ago Frank Gifford, who I believe joined the Giants 2 years before you did, had mentioned his signing bonus was $250.
Yeah.
And that the reason why he accepted it so quickly because he needed his money because his oldest son was in the hospital.
Yeah.
Needed to pay the bills.
That's right. Well, that's right. And a few kids in the hospital too. I was playing pay the bills. I had to pay the bills. Yeah.
And then you played for the New York Giants for quite a while, and I remember hearing about this. At the time, the Giants had the famed umbrella defense.
That's right.
Now, I'm somewhat of a football history, but what exactly was the umbrella defense?
Well, see, the way it was set up was 2 cornerbacks and 2 safety men, and it was sort of like an umbrella, and Landry played one corner, Tom Landry, and I played the other. And then Herb Rich he was down from Tennessee, and he was there. He played safety man. And Emlyn Tennell, he was a black fellow from Iowa. He was, I guess, one of the first blacks in pro football.
That's right, and I believe in his career he had well over 60 interceptions, if I'm right.
Oh yeah, I think it was 60 or 70, probably. It might have been. You know, he was a good football player. He really was. He was a great guy too. He was a good friend.
In fact, it says here you yourself had 6 interceptions in your rookie year, so it must have been a pretty exciting time to start off your career that way.
Yeah, well, yep. Yeah, had to get lucky with it too sometimes.
And then, of course, you stayed with the Giants from 54 to 57, and was it in 56 they had won the NFL championship?
Right. We beat the Chicago Bears 47-7.
Wow, that must have been one heck of a ball game to be part of.
Yeah, they were favored, about 10-point favorite on us, you know, over us to beat us. And we played them during the year, and they had Harlan Hill, who was a great receiver. He came up at the same time, about the same time I did. was a wide receiver. He came out of a small college in Alabama, and he was really a great receiver for the Chicago Bears. And as I said, he played us. They played us in the season, and during the season we won the game. We were winning the game, and they turned around and tied us up 17-17.
Wow.
So then we met them again in the championship, and that was the 47-7 game. So.
And then you got traded off in '58 to the Chicago Cardinals.
I got traded to the Chicago Cardinals for Pat Summerall and Lyndon Crow.
A gentleman, Pat Summerall, of course, many of the younger listeners would know more as an announcer, but back then he was a pretty darn good field goal kicker as well.
Oh, yeah, he was a defensive end. He was a good football player.
It's real interesting that Pat Summerall, in his entire career, he only had one touchdown, and ironically, it came off of an interception from future Saints general manager Jim Finks.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, well, anyway, then you returned to the Giants to play another 3 years, 59 to 61.
Yeah, that's where Summerall, when he tells the story that I was traded for him and Lyndon Crow, and he said the Giants didn't like what they got. He said, so they traded back for Nolan. And I came back to them, and it was 59.
Yeah, and then of course, and then shortly afterwards, you started your coaching career. You wound up in Dallas in 1962 with your longtime friend and defensive back partner Tom Landry.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, according to the list here, in 1963, you became the Cowboys' full-time defensive back coach.
Yeah, I came down as a coach at 62, but on Saturday before the opening game, which was against Philadelphia, and I had been coaching all during the summer there and everything else, and he said to me, Landry said to me, how would you like to play again, Dick? I said, play again? I said, heck, I'm 20 pounds overweight, and I haven't even worked out as a player. And he says, oh, don't worry, you can handle that real well, easy. And I said, well, if you want me to play, I said, when do you want me to start? He said, tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Wow.
The Philadelphia Eagles. So I said, okay. I played the whole game. By halftime, I had lost that 20 pounds I had gained.
Now, I believe it was shortly thereafter, maybe around 64, I believe. Wasn't that around the time you had come up with the concept of flex defense?
Yes, yeah.
Now, tell our listeners exactly what is the basics of the flex.
Well, the flex is from a four-man line, which we used to call a 4-3. And then what the flex is, it was still the same as a normal regular 4-3, but the thing is, the flex was we had different stunts and different moves with the defensive linemen. And we used to have a defense where you had four-man on the line, where you played what they called an inside 4-3, and the two tackles are hard inside, and the two ends were on the shoulders of the tackles, and then and they played very tough that way. And then the next time, sometimes you call it an outside 4-3, then the tackles would work on the outside shoulder of the guards, and the middle linebacker would step up into that center to stop the hole that way. But then what we did with the flex is that we combined the two defenses together and played them both at the same time. We just put it together as one defense. And it was a defense that was depended a great deal on coordination by guys and who really believed in it and so forth. And when a guy gets through playing it, he really enjoyed it, because it was pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, and then, of course, a little bit while afterwards, I believe it would have been both the 66 and 67 regular seasons, the Cowboys became a very competitive team. But unfortunately, both times y'all had to play Green Bay in the NFL Championship.
Yep.
I think the first time was in Dallas.
First time was in Dallas, that's right. And we could have, we were down on the 4 or 5 yard line, we could have won it. And what happened was that I think it was a boy he was a Maryland boy, I think it was, that played for the Packers, and he intercepted a pass in the end zone, and it was that shut us off, and I think the score was like 17-14 or something like that.
Yeah, I believe the defensive back was Tom Brown.
Tom Brown, that's the guy. Yep, you got him.
And then the next year, I think probably an NFL game very few people will forget, the Ice Bowl.
That's right. We were there, and it was like 40 below, I guess, and so forth, and we played that game. And, of course, the field at that time, Lombardi, when he was up there, of course, with the Giants too at the same time we were there, and then he went on to Green Bay as a coach. And what happened was he put underneath the field of pipes, where you could pour hot water, run hot water through it, and so forth, and make it either melt the ice or keep it from freezing. If you kept the hot water in there all the time, and then when we played the game, something happened to the pipes and so forth, and it didn't work out that way. The field became a sheet of ice, but we still played the game. And it was a tough game to play because, boy, once you started going one way, you tried to stop. There was no way of stopping. You were just going to keep on going until you hit something.
I thought one story that came out many years later after the Ice Bowl, Jethro Pugh, of course, who you know very well, the longtime defensive tackle for the Cowboys, he had always said on that last play where Bart Starr scored the touchdown that Jerry Kramer started early. And about 20 years after the Ice Bowl, a newspaper article came out where Jerry Kramer finally admitted, yes, that he did actually got a little head start ahead of the ball.
Yeah, but then when they hit, because they knew where they were going, when they hit the object they were hitting, all they did was it was just like being on ice skates, The guy couldn't stop. He couldn't get any hold of the ground or anything else. He was going to just keep going until he fell over,
Now, one story that had come out, I know, of course, in San Francisco, in 1968, you took the head coaching job with the 49ers. But about 10 years before you came to the Saints, were you also interviewed to replace Tom Fears as head coach here?
Yeah, well, I was, what happened was I was in the running at the time for that job with Tom Fears and also, Ed Hughes and I forgot who else was there. And what happened was that I was talking to Clint Murchison, who was owner of the Cowboys, and he told me I ought to just wait. He said, don't wait. He said, don't go yet. He said, you'll get your chance. I said, okay. Well, then I ended up pulling my name out of it and out of the party, out of the pool of the thing, and players and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went ahead and stayed with the Cowboys, and that way. And then I went to board all everything else. And but then there was Tom Fears and myself and Ed Hughes and I don't know who else, somebody else. We're all in line, and it just fell that way. So it was fine.
Yeah, and then, of course, in 68, it worked out beautifully for you because you get the head coaching job at San Francisco, a team that, going back to when they were members of the All-American Football Conference, hadn't won a title. Then you came in and you helped them win 3 in a row.
Yeah, we won the division 3 times and won the playoffs, and then we were at the championships, going to the championship, and the guy that knocked me out of it was Landry, of the Cowboys, and both of them were right down to the wire, to the last seconds of the game.
I remember both of them a little while back. I had sent you the 70 NFC Championship game, which was pretty steady throughout. But the 72 game, some fans will remember, here's your 49ers up 28-13, and somehow Dallas can score 17 points in the last 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And because I believe Tony Frisch was the Cowboys kicker, they were able to make 2 straight onside kicks. Yeah. And I have to tell you, that must have been an absolutely frustrating way to lose.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, what happened was Preston Riley was a wide receiver for me, and they were in a position where they had to kick an onside kick in order to get the ball back, and that was right near the seconds, near the end of the game. And what they did is that they kicked it, and it hit Preston Riley, and he got it, and he fell to the ground with it, and he was on all fours, and the ball was right under his chest, and he had his hands on the ground and his knees, and he couldn't pick it up.
Wow.
So, I don't know whether that's pressure or what, but he wasn't able to pick it up, and Mel Renfro just shot right in underneath him and took it.
And of course, in 1970, you were named National Conference Coach of the Year for your hard work and success out there at San Francisco, and your career out there lasted all the way through 75. After the division titles and such, what exactly went on when you were dismissed from them?
Well, just record-wise, just in other words, I was, had a lower record. In other words, I was losing games, and I wasn't getting them back in the playoffs, and that's why it ended up that way. But the guy that was there was Lou Spadia, he was the president, general manager. And in fact, this past year, last February, I went up to California to induct Dave Wilcox into the Hall of Fame in California. And when I was there, Lou Spadia ran that Hall of Fame in San Francisco. You know, he was the head of it. And anyway, and he just was there, and we were sitting in the restaurant there, or the cocktail lounge, and he said, you know, the biggest mistake I ever made was, you know what the biggest mistake I ever made was? And I said, no. I said, what was it? He said, firing you. He said, I should never have fired you. And I said, well, I told you that to begin with.
Now, speaking of players, I will say this. One of the finest playoff games I think y'all had in San Francisco was when y'all had, I believe in 1970, y'all had to go up to frigid Minnesota.
Oh, yes.
And I think you wound up beating them, I believe it was 10-0?
No, 14.
And I remember John Brody had said before the game that y'all were out on the field warming up.
Yes.
And Bud Grant, very tough-minded coach, he wouldn't let his own Vikings players have heaters.
That's right.
And I believe John Brody said, well, let's have heaters, but we'll go out in short sleeves to show them we're tough.
That's right. He went out in short sleeves. That's right.
And it seemed like him, and you brought out great names like Dave Wilcox, I believe Frank Nunley.
Yep, Frank Nunley, yep.
And Gene Washington. Y'all really handed to him that day.
Well, we did. You know, in fact, when it was 17-14, but they didn't make that 14th point until the last seconds of the game. See, so we had the 17, and the game was over when they after they scored. They scored, and it was they just made 17. They had no ball. They weren't going to get the ball again. So anyway, the game was over.
Well, then you were let go from San Francisco, and I believe it was in '77. You wound up as a linebackers coach with Hank Stram here in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And what was it? Did you know Hank before you took the job here?
Oh yeah, I know him because I played against him when he was in Kansas City and so forth. You know, and I was in San Francisco. I think I met him on a Monday night game. You know, somewhere there. And
I tell you what, recently, of course, he was named to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I guess you must have felt pretty happy for him when that announcement came.
Oh yeah, he was good at it. He did all right. It was great for him. Yep.
And then, of course, you come here, and on February the 6th, you get named head coach of the Saints and replacing Coach Stram. And it must have been, what were your first impressions when you first met John Meekum and agreed to accept the job later on?
Well, John he's a very, agreeable guy. He's very, had a great personality, and he was socially a great guy, and so forth. And I just knew him from originally when Tom Fears, got the job and so forth. I met him there. So that's where I met him at that time.
Right.
And his dad was a great guy, and John Meekum Sr. He really was a super guy. He was one of those guys that was in the oil business, and he was one of them that his handshake was good enough,
Mm-hmm.
and he lived by that. He lived by it, and he always backed it up too.
Right.
He was a tremendous guy.
Well, then eventually, 78 draft comes around in May, and y'all, I think, picked a pretty good guy. Y'all first picked the wide receiver out of Florida, Wes Chandler.
Yes, yeah. Wes was he could play. He was a good athlete. Really was.
I remember Wayne Mack, who I'm sure you remember from New Orleans Broadcasting.
Oh yeah, Wayne was a good friend. Yep, he's a good man too. Yep.
Wayne had told me one time he felt Wes Chandler was probably the greatest receiver who could adjust to the ball in flight. And you probably have to agree, Wes just had an incredible amount of swiftiness when he was here.
Oh yeah, he had great ability. I mean, he could certainly play in other places too if he had to. But as a wide receiver, he was a great receiver. That was the main thing for him. But he could, he had a lot of ability. He had the speed and he had everything. He was strong and powerful with it, and he was as quick as could be.
Well, I also remember 1978 because, well, obviously one of the finest quarterbacks maybe the league ever had, and probably the most unsung, and Archie Manning. He must have been a tremendous asset for you.
Yeah, he was. In fact, that first year, I think he was the most valuable player in the league.
And a very interesting fact because he is the only man in NFL NFC history that was named the MVP on a losing team.
Yeah, that's right. Well, see, I think we might have been, I don't know if it was, we were 8-8 at that time, I think.
78 was 7-9.
Yeah, okay, it might have been whichever one it was.
And the following year, of course, 79 was 8-8. And, of course, course, another reason why the incredible offense you had that year was the great backfield of Tony Galbraith and Chuck Muncie.
Yes, that's right, yeah. That's true. You're right. And, of course, Muncie was a good guy, but, he's always getting himself in a spot sometimes. And he had an awful lot of ability. Chuck did. He could play in a lot of places. He could have played outside with Wes Chandler, the wide receiver, and been just as good if he wanted to. And, of course, as a back, he was a great back, too. He had tremendous ability. And, of course, he and Tony Galbraith were, two twin guys that were both could strike you and beat you, without any trouble. They both could run, and they were both strong, powerful. They had good hands, and they were smart football players, too.
And I think another great asset about Tony Galbraith we had talked about the night before was what a tremendous pass-catching back.
He could. I'll tell you what. You could throw a bucket of water at him, and he'd catch the bucket and wouldn't drop. He'd put a drop on the ground.
Oh, yeah, he just had swiftiness, and, of course, the greatest example of that, I know you remember vividly, his outstanding end zone catch in '79 on Monday Night Football against Oakland.
That's right, yeah. He had great feel for it, great touch himself, and he could throw a ball himself, too. If you wanted to throw like a halfback pass, he could throw it, and he'd be just as accurate with it. He was good that way, and he was a great guy to coach. He was an easy guy to coach.
And then, of course, the other star receiver on that team who turned out to be one of the finest tight ends of the '70s, that was Henry Childs.
Oh, yeah. Henry, yeah. He went to the Pro Bowl. In fact, the one year at the Pro Bowl, there was six Saints in the game, at the Pro Bowl game.
Yeah, him, Muncie, Manning, Wes Chandler, Tommy Myers.
Yeah, that's right. Tommy Myers, too. Was a defensive back who was a good one. And Meekum took all the coaching staff and everything to the game because we had the most players in the Pro Bowl game at that time. So it was, and he was happy with that. So he said, "Sure, let's go."
And it also seemed like both in '78 and '79, your first three meetings against Atlanta, it seemed like nothing could go right at the end. The '78 game, I think it was in October the 12th, Bartkowski throws that big bend that got deflected off of, I think, Eric Felton and Ralph McGill.
Yeah.
That wound up leading to an Alfred Jackson touchdown. And then, which I think where you and the team got really ripped off, was it was late in the game at Atlanta, at Fulton County. And Bartkowski threw a pass that Ralph McGill intercepted.
Yeah.
But the official closest to the play said Maurice Spencer interfered with the receiver, which the league later in the year said that should not have been called.
Yep.
And it just seemed like, for whatever reason, the Saints have always had bad luck with those Falcons.
Yeah, that's true. I guess so at that time. But I guess they're a better team now. I think they're really in contention, I guess, a lot of times. Yeah.
Now, of course, some really good players y'all had in the '70s on defense. Of course, my personal favorite, middle linebacker Joe Fetterspiel.
Yeah. Yep. Joe was he was a good football player. He played real well. He got better as he went along.
And then, of course, up front on the defensive line, some personal fan favorites. One of mine, of course, was a longtime veteran out of the University of Oklahoma, Derlin Moore.
Yes, and Derlin was good. He was a good tackle, and he was a smart player, too. And, he did well with it, too. When you talk about players in that time, around that time, well, for 49ers, one guy, Charlie Kruger.
Ah.
There's a guy who really was a great football player. You couldn't get him out of the game. If he was hurt, you had to go out and drag him off the field. He wouldn't get out. But he was a good football player too. But anyway, I know in the Saints with Derlin Moore too. He was a good one, and we had some good players. We were just slowly building it to getting enough players that were good that you could go ahead and make a move towards the championship.
Well, finally, one guy I definitely want you to talk about who was probably one of the first darn good special team aces in the league, and Rich Maudie.
Oh yeah, Rich Maudie he had ability, but he was a very tough kid too. He was a persistent, determined guy. That's why, and a very smart individual, and that's why he was really good. He made a lot of big plays on defense. On the kicking game.
Mm-hmm.
And he really contributed to the club. He was as important to your team in the kicking game as any guy could be.
Now, then, of course, the one thing I have to ask you, it's not a good thing, but the first pick of 79 turned out to be Russell Erxleben.
Boy, oh boy.
And I take it, did you have any say in that pick, or was that other people's decisions to go after him first?
Well, it was the decisions of the head guy in the scouting end of it, who was the head scout and so forth, who ran the other ones. You know, you have a head guy who works for you, and then he put all the marbles on him and said he was good. And I said, boy, see, remember the one that the Raiders, the kicking team guy, what's his name, the kicker, the punter for the kicker for the Raiders?
Oh, right now?
No, he was there at the same time as was picked number one, the first.
Oh, Ray Guy.
Ray Guy.
Okay.
It was like that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought that Erxleben was going to do it. But Erxleben, when he came to pro football, what happened to him was in college, when you kicked field goals, you kicked it with the ball that you wanted, you know.
Right.
And then and you didn't kick with the ball that was on the field.
Right.
And the ball he kicked was like a watermelon, you know. And he could get that thing to go as straight as he wanted to, and without any trouble. And he didn't have to work at it like you would off the regular football, you know, when you get the points at both ends, you know.
Right.
So things that he didn't have control of that at the time, kicking it down.
And then, but of course, 1979 turned out to be an 8-8 season, which of course was the best ever at that time in team history. And I thought it was very interesting the way y'all closed out the year. Y'all defeated the Super Bowl-bound Rams 29-14 in what turned out to be the Rams' last game in Los Angeles.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
And of course, Archie Manning had a good game that day. I think my dear friend of mine, Mike Strawn, had a touchdown as well.
Yeah, hey, Mike Strawn, the running back.
Oh, yeah.
How is he doing?
Oh, listen, Mike is doing real well. He lives in Kenner, Louisiana, and he's in the real estate business.
He backed up Monsignor, and he was a good back. He really was. He had a lot of ability, and he was a very smart guy. That's the thing, too. That's pretty important.
Right, because that year was an interesting group of backups, because three decent running backs. You also had Wayne Wilson, along with Jack Holmes and Kim Jones.
Yeah. Wayne Wilson, that's the guy. Yeah, I remember Wayne. Yeah, he was a good one, too. He had a lot of ability, yeah.
And then, of course, unfortunately, after that famous Pro Bowl, after 79 season, came 1980. And sadly, for whatever reason, it just seemed like a season that wasn't in the cards for the Saints, despite the fact that many of the magazines thought the Saints might win the Western Division.
Yeah, no. But, that's the way it goes.
Of course, unfortunately, you got released 12 weeks into the season, and then I believe a gentleman who you've known very well, Dick Stanfield, took over for you for the last 4 games.
Yeah, that's right.
And Dick Stanfield, which a lot of people may not remember, this is a gentleman who about 6 years ago almost got to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for his career as an offensive lineman.
Yes, he was a number 1 pick for the Detroit Lions, and he was a back, a lineman, a guard. Well, when he was in New Orleans, he could pull and run better than any guard he had. And he was about 55 years old then, you know.
Right.
And he was around 50, somewhere close to it, but he had great ability, boy. He was really a gifted guy, and he was a big man, but he moved like a small guy, very quick, in everything he did. He was a great handball man.
Wow. And then, of course, I believe, was it right after the Saints let you go that you wound up back in Dallas?
Yes.
And did you stay with Coach Landry through the rest of his tenure?
Yes. Yeah. And then Jimmy Johnson was here, and I was leaving, and he asked me to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed for a year, 2 years, and then I got out of it. I just retired.
Well, some of the players I remember in Dallas from the 80s, in fact, one of them I talked to last year when the Super Bowl was in New Orleans was Everson Walls.
Yes.
And here's a gentleman in his rookie year had 11 interceptions. He must have been one heck of a rookie.
Yeah, he was. He was a good football player. He wasn't a blinding speed sort of a guy. He had good speed, not tremendously fast, but he was smart. How to handle and how to cover an individual. Technique-wise, he was good at it.
And then, of course, many times the Saints went to Dallas under Bum Phillips to face the Cowboys, and the Cowboys won every time. And then in '84, the game I'll never forget, Sunday Night Football, when the Saints had a 27-6 lead, and the Cowboys came back, brought it to overtime, and won 30-27. In the fourth quarter, it seems like Dallas couldn't do any wrong. I believe Hogan Boom started the game.
Yeah.
And then Danny White came in to help them to a few touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And I take it, I will say this, the one thing about the Cowboys under when you were there and Coach Landry was there, it almost seemed like they were never ever out of any game and any win was possible.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So, and then like you said, you finished up towards the end with Coach Johnson for a couple of years, and now of course those early years for Coach Johnson were kind of rough. I believe the first year he was 1-15. Now back then, could you see the signs that this team had a good future under Jimmy Johnson?
Well, you mean here in the Cowboys thing?
Right.
Well, do you remember they made a trade, or I think Jerry Jones made a trade with Minnesota?
For Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker.
Right.
It was, let me tell you, it was the biggest trade I've seen in a long time for what could be done. In other words, and he ended up with the first three picks of Minnesota's for 3 years, or he got the 9 players that were underneath that in that trade. And if he didn't like the player that he had in that first year, then what he did is he gave him back to Minnesota and he took the draft choice back. See?
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up getting, he had like 8 or 9 picks in the draft that ended up giving him the football team that he wanted right after that, a year later. And that's where Jimmy Johnson had such a great team there. Really, he had some great picks that were in there in those drafts, in the first 2 drafts and so forth. And that's how they put a team together. It was really unbelievable. But and Herschel Walker was the guy that made it work because they got so much for him. You know, it was like Ollie Matson when they picked him 10 for 1 in the Los Angeles, Rams. They wanted him and they got him and they gave 10 players but the 10 players they gave up were not very good players. Only one of them played after that. But the guys that were picked in the draft by Jerry Jones and drafts coming up when Herschel went to Minnesota, those players were good, really good players. And that's how they really stocked the football team in Dallas.
Now, since your tenure in Dallas, have you been retired from football since?
Oh, yeah, I've been, sure.
Yeah.
All I did was I did some scouting for some people. That's all. And I had a good time doing it. It was a lot of fun. And I just did that and just stayed retired.
So, are there ever any days that you miss all the action in person?
Oh yeah, sometimes. Yeah. And see, my son is is with the Ravens.
Right.
And he's defensive coordinator.
Right, because I believe prior to that he was with the Redskins.
He was with the Redskins, right? Yeah.
And has had a pretty darn good career. You think in the near future we'll be hearing his name as a head coach?
Well, I think so, because he's done very well, with the Ravens right now, and a lot of people are talking about him too. So if he wants to be there, I guess he'll probably get his chance.
Wow. Well, it's hard to believe now. Some 25 years since you were here in New Orleans, start as a head coach, rather. You were, of course, here before that with Coach Dram. And I have to tell you what, this has been a real honor having the chance to interview you for this. I know the people of Southeast Louisiana have a lot of fond memories for what you did. And I'll mention another gentleman's name in New Orleans media, the gentleman that runs the Saints Hall of Fame, Kenny Trahan, always speaks very highly of you.
Yeah, Kenny Trahan, yeah.
And he hopes, and so do I, one of these days you can come down for one of the reunions. I know there's a lot of nice people that'd love to see you again.
Yeah, I know. I talked to him, and he had all the highlights, I guess, on some of the games, so forth. I've talked to him a few times. In fact, some of the tapes that they have and all that, I got them from him.
All the years I followed New Orleans Saints football as well as the media, I think there's no doubt in my mind, maybe you might agree, Wayne Mack was probably one of the most colorful broadcasters we've had.
He was a super guy. He really was good at it, and he was, as far as I was concerned, he was a good friend too, and he called the shots like he should be and all that, but he was really he was a good guy to be around.
And I believe another gentleman you would remember fondly who used to work at Channel 4 was Hap Glaude.
Yeah. Yep, Bloody, yep. Yes, that's a long time. That's right.
Yeah, unfortunately, Hap left us back in 1989.
Yeah.
But I will say this, if there was ever a member of the media who was very supportive of the Saints and would go out of his way not to be negative easily, it'd be Hap.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hap was he was a good guy, too. He was.
Wow.
So so you brought up a lot of history, boy, I'll tell you that.
Well, that is, ironically, I tell people my college major was meteorology, but my entire life I think I've minored in the Saints.
Well, that's great.
But like I said, along the way, Coach, you've had a lot of decent players here. Too bad the Super Bowl didn't happen when it should have.
Yeah.
And I know, because I guarantee I told somebody years ago, if the Saints ever won the Super Bowl in 1 year, we'd probably have 2 Mardi Gras.
Yeah, I guess so. It probably would be.
Wow. Well, listen, Coach, it's been a real honor. I know all the people, of course, Thibodeau, once again, is the home of Saints training camp. And a lot of people do have a lot of fondness from your tenure here, and we really appreciate all the time you've given us.
Oh, well, it was great being there. I enjoyed it. Had a great time.